Venezuela's economy runs on oil, its lifeline, the very heart that keeps the nation's pulse beating. Oil is not just a commodity here, it's the foundation upon which modern Venezuela was built, shaping its cities, its politics, and the daily lives of its people. From the bustling streets of Caracas to the remote villages, oil money has touched every corner, funding roads, schools, and hospitals. Oil is Venezuela's leverage on the world stage, a source of immense power and influence. But it's also a double-edged sword, a vulnerability that leaves the country exposed to the whims of global markets and foreign powers. When oil prices soar, prosperity follows. But when they crash, the nation feels every shockwave. For decades, oil has been the engine driving Venezuela's economy, funding everything from ambitious social programs to the salaries of government workers. Every tanker that leaves port is more than just a shipment, it's a lifeline for millions, a crucial asset that keeps the country afloat. The fate of each barrel can mean the difference between stability and crisis. The world watches Venezuela's oil exports with intense scrutiny. Any disruption, whether from political turmoil, technical failures, or international sanctions, can send ripples through global markets, affecting everything from fuel prices to diplomatic relations. Oil is not just Venezuela's business, it's the world's concern. In recent years, U.S. sanctions have tightened the noose around Venezuela's oil industry, aiming to force political change by choking off the country's most vital source of revenue. These measures have made it nearly impossible for Venezuela to sell oil openly, pushing the nation into a corner and deepening its economic crisis. In response, Venezuela's so-called shadow fleet has emerged, using secretive tactics to evade detection. Tankers turn off their transponders, sail under false names, and take circuitous routes across the oceans. These clandestine operations are a high-stakes gamble, risking international penalties to keep oil flowing out and cash coming in. At sea, ships meet under cover of darkness to transfer cargo from one vessel to another, hiding the oil's true origin. Crews work quickly and quietly, knowing that discovery could mean seizure or blacklisting. These covert maneuvers are now routine, a testament to the lengths Venezuela will go to survive. China has stepped in as Venezuela's main buyer, providing a crucial market for its embattled oil. Other nations, too, have a stake in this high-stakes game, each weighing the risks and rewards of defying sanctions. For Venezuela, these partnerships are a lifeline, but they come with strings attached and shifting loyalties. Every U.S. move against Venezuelan oil is a global event, covered by headlines and analyzed by experts. The consequences ripple far beyond Venezuela's borders, threatening to disrupt economies, shift alliances, and reshape the balance of power in the region and beyond. The Caribbean has become a tense stage for this geopolitical drama, with naval patrols, shadowy tankers, and international observers all vying for control and influence. The stakes are high, and every move is watched closely. The fate of Venezuela's oil exports is no longer just a national issue, it's a global flashpoint, where economics, politics, and survival intersect. The world is watching, and the next chapter is still being written. On December 20, 2025, U.S. forces executed a high-stakes operation in the Caribbean, seizing a Venezuelan oil tanker in international waters just off the coast of Barbados. The move was not only a demonstration of military capability, but also a clear signal to the international community that the United States was willing to take unprecedented action to enforce its policies. This was a bold, public show of power, carried out in broad daylight and under the watchful eyes of both local authorities and international observers. The operation was meticulously planned, with U.S. Navy personnel boarding the tanker swiftly and efficiently, leaving no room for resistance or confusion. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem wasted no time in confirming the operation. She posted dramatic footage on social media, showing helicopters circling the massive ship, their rotors whipping up the sea spray as they hovered above the deck. The images quickly went viral, capturing the attention of news outlets around the world and fueling intense debate about the legality and implications of the U.S. action. This was more than just a tactical maneuver. It was a carefully crafted message to Caracas and the world. The United States was making it clear that it was prepared to enforce its oil embargo with military force, not just economic sanctions. The sight of a U.S. Navy warship escorting the seized tanker sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, raising questions about the future of international maritime law and the balance of power in the region. This was not an isolated incident. In fact, It marked the second such seizure in just a matter of weeks, signaling a new, more aggressive phase in U.S. policy toward Venezuela and its allies. The pattern of escalating action suggested that Washington was no longer content with symbolic gestures. It was now taking concrete steps to disrupt the flow of oil and challenge the Maduro regime directly. President Trump's administration has dramatically ramped up its military presence in the Caribbean, deploying additional ships and aircraft to patrol the region's busy shipping lanes. This show of force has not gone unnoticed, and it has raised tensions among neighboring countries, many of whom fear being drawn into a conflict that could destabilize the entire region. Reports of additional strikes and casualties have begun to surface, putting the entire area on edge. Emergency response teams are on high alert, and local communities are bracing for the possibility of further violence or environmental disasters resulting from damaged tankers. The U.S. is no longer just enforcing sanctions. It's escalating to direct confrontation at sea. The deployment of destroyers and rapid response teams signals a willingness to engage in high-risk operations, even at the cost of sparking a broader conflict. For the people living along the Caribbean coast, the presence of warships and the constant threat of violence have become a daily reality. International news outlets are closely monitoring the situation, and analysts warn that the region now faces the real risk of a wider conflict that could draw in multiple nations. Each tanker seized, each confrontation at sea, brings the world one step closer to open hostilities. The stakes have never been higher, and the next move could determine the fate of the entire region. The Centuries, a Panama-flagged tanker, left Venezuela loaded with 1.8 million barrels of Mary crude, bound for China. To evade detection, it used a false name and was escorted by the Venezuelan Navy, evidence of the high stakes. The ship's cargo was bought by Satao Tijana Oil Trading, a middleman shielding buyers from direct links to Venezuela. By seizing the Centuries, the U.S. struck at the heart of Venezuela's shadow oil network. The message: any involvement with Venezuelan oil now risks military intervention and massive financial loss. The Century's fate is a warning to the entire maritime industry. The shadow trade is now in the crosshairs. The United States justified the dramatic seizure of the oil tanker as part of a broader campaign to crack down on the illicit oil trade, which it claims is fueling instability and criminal networks across the globe. Officials argued that such actions are necessary to disrupt the flow of illegal profits that support regimes and organizations considered hostile to U.S. interests. Washington framed the move as a step to enforce international law, emphasizing its commitment to upholding global norms and the rules-based order at sea. The U.S. pointed to United Nations resolutions and international agreements as the legal foundation for its actions, seeking to legitimize the operation in the eyes of the world. Secretary Noem went further, claiming that profits from Venezuelan oil directly fund narco-terrorism and organized crime, painting a picture of oil money being funneled into dangerous hands. This narrative was designed to rally both domestic and international support by linking the oil trade to broader security threats. By framing the operation as a fight against transnational crime, rather than simply an extension of economic sanctions, U.S. officials sought to present the seizure as a necessary law enforcement action, not just a political maneuver. President Trump had recently announced what he called a total and complete blockade on sanctioned oil tankers, signaling a new era of aggressive enforcement. This declaration was intended to send a clear message to both allies and adversaries that the U.S. was prepared to escalate its efforts to stop the flow of sanctioned oil. The deployment of U.S. Navy ships and the visible preparation for maritime operations underscored the seriousness of this new policy, setting the stage for potential military involvement if necessary. The seizure of the Centuries was the first real test of this assertive approach, serving as a high-profile example of Washington's willingness to act decisively. The U.S. narrative was clear. This was about upholding the law, ensuring security, and demonstrating presidential authority, not about aggression or unilateralism. Officials insisted that their actions were rooted in legal principles and the need to protect the international community. By painting Venezuela's oil trade as inherently criminal, Washington aimed to delegitimize Maduro's government and portray its own actions as both justified and necessary. In doing so, the U.S. sought to further isolate President Maduro on the world stage, using legal and moral arguments to justify its increasingly forceful measures. Ultimately, Washington wanted the world to see it not as an aggressor, but as the enforcer of international law and order. A nation acting to protect global security, even as its actions spark debate and controversy. What made the Century's seizure so significant? The ship itself wasn't on any U.S. sanctions list. Previous seizures targeted blacklisted vessels. This time, the U.S. targeted a ship solely for carrying Venezuelan oil. The rules have changed. Any tanker with Venezuelan crude is now a potential target, regardless of its own record. This move blurs legal lines and creates uncertainty for global shipping. The U.S. has shifted from targeted sanctions to a de facto naval blockade. Every ship leaving Venezuela now faces the threat of military action. The risk of escalation and miscalculation has never been higher. Venezuela's response was swift and furious, branding the U.S. action as piracy and theft. President Maduro denounced the seizure as a violation of sovereignty and an illegal attempt at regime change. Caracas vowed to resist, promising retaliation and taking its case to the United Nations. The government's rhetoric is designed to rally international support and paint Venezuela as a victim of imperial aggression. The standoff is now as much about global perception as it is about oil. Tensions are rising, and both sides are digging in for a prolonged confrontation. Experts warn the Century's seizure marks a dangerous escalation. By targeting a non-sanctioned vessel, the U.S. has made all tankers near Venezuela potential targets, rattling the shipping industry. The shadow war at sea has moved from financial sanctions to military showdowns. The risk of direct clashes, between navies or with armed crews, has grown sharply. Legal experts question the U.S.'s right to seize foreign-flagged ships in international waters, warning of dangerous precedents. This aggressive strategy could provoke retaliation, destabilize the region, and disrupt global energy markets. A blockade is an act of war. One misstep could ignite a wider conflict. The world is watching a perilous game with explosive stakes. The U.S. crackdown has sent shockwaves through the global oil market. Venezuela's exports are plummeting as shippers and insurers flee the mounting risks. With dozens of tankers sidelined, 1 million barrels a day could vanish from the market, driving up prices worldwide. China, Venezuela's top customer, faces higher costs, but the pain will be felt from Asia to the Americas. The risk now isn't just about sanctions, it's about geography. Any ship near Venezuela is a liability. A two-tier tanker system is emerging. Mainstream operators steer clear, while risk-takers demand sky-high fees. The U.S. is weaponizing uncertainty, aiming to collapse Venezuela's oil trade through fear and financial pain. The Century's seizure is a turning point with global consequences. For Venezuelans, it threatens deeper economic crisis and humanitarian suffering. For the U.S., it's a gamble, hoping to force change in Caracas, but risking a drawn-out conflict and diplomatic fallout. The world's major powers, especially China and Russia, must now decide how to respond. The Caribbean is a flashpoint. Every move risks a broader confrontation. The crisis is no longer just about oil. It's about international law, alliances, and the fragile peace of an entire region. The world waits, hoping for restraint before escalation spirals out of control.